My name is Gabrielle Lawson. I'm 29 years old. And 3 weeks ago, my father looked me straight in the eye and told me I'd be dead to this family if I opened a wooden box with my own name on it. I wish I were exaggerating. I wish that moment had been a misunderstanding, or some strange joke that didn't land. But it wasn't. That box had been hidden in my parents' attic for 12 years. And when I finally opened it in front of 50 guests at their 35th wedding anniversary party, nobody looked at my father the same way again. But before I tell you what happened that night, I'm curious about something. Where are you watching this from right now? And what time is it where you live? Seriously, tell me in the comments. I always find it fascinating how stories travel across the world. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. 3 weeks ago, I drove from Columbus to a tiny town called Mill Haven. If you've never heard of it, you're not alone. Most people haven't. It's the kind of place where the population barely changes from year to year, and everyone still waves when they pass each other on the road. My parents were preparing for their 35th wedding anniversary party, and like always, I came home to help. My mom had already started decorating the house, and my dad was outside setting up tables in the backyard. The entire family was expected to show up that weekend. My job was simple: help clean out the attic. Now, if you've ever been inside an old attic in a small Midwestern house, you know the smell. Dust, dry wood, cardboard, and something faintly sweet that reminds you of old books. As soon as I pushed open the attic door, that familiar scent hit me. For a moment, it even made me smile. My grandfather used to sit up there sometimes, smoking his pipe when I was little. The smell of his pipe tobacco had soaked into the wood beams over the years, and even now, more than a decade after he passed away, it still lingered faintly in the air. I spent about 20 minutes moving boxes around. Most of them belonged to my older brother Todd. Old sports equipment, college textbooks, random junk no one ever throws away. And then I saw it. It was sitting behind one of Todd's storage bins, almost like someone had intentionally hidden it there. A small walnut box. The wood was dark and polished, and a red wax seal held the lid shut. At first, I thought it might be one of my grandfather's old keepsakes. But when I picked it up and brushed the dust off the top, my stomach tightened. My name was written on the lid. Not printed. Written. In my grandfather's handwriting. Gabrielle Lawson. I just stared at it for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. Why would my grandfather leave something for me? And why would it be buried in the attic like this? Then I noticed something else. The box wasn't just placed there randomly. Todd's heavy storage bins had been pushed in front of it, almost like someone wanted to make sure nobody found it by accident. Which meant one thing: someone had hidden it. And whoever hid it didn't want me to see it. I was still turning the box over in my hands when I heard footsteps on the attic ladder. My father appeared at the top. First, he looked completely normal. But the moment his eyes landed on the box in my hands, everything changed. I have never seen the color drain from someone's face that quickly. He climbed the last step so fast it almost looked like he slipped. Then he walked straight toward me and grabbed the box out of my hands. Not gently. Hard. "What are you doing with this?" he demanded. I blinked at him, confused. "I just found it behind Todd's stuff. It has my name on it." For a second, he didn't say anything. He just held the box, staring at it like it was something dangerous. Then he looked back at me, and the expression in his eyes made my stomach drop. "Listen to me carefully," he said. His voice was low, tight, and completely serious. "If you open this box, you are dead to this family." The words hit me like cold water. I actually laughed at first because the threat sounded so extreme it didn't make sense. "Dad, what are you talking about? It literally has my name on it." He stepped closer. "Put it back where you found it," he said. "And forget about it." Now, I don't know about you, but when someone reacts like that, it doesn't make you less curious. It makes you 100 times more curious. So the moment my father left the attic, I closed the door behind him, sat down on the dusty floor, and broke the wax seal. Inside the box were 3 envelopes. Each one contained an official property deed. I opened the first one. The family house in Mill Haven. Owner: Gabrielle Lawson. I opened the second. 40 acres of farmland outside town. Owner: Gabrielle Lawson. My hand started shaking as I opened the third. The lake cabin at Buckeye Lake. Owner: Gabrielle Lawson. All 3 properties had been legally transferred to me when I was 6 years old. I sat there on the attic floor for a long time, staring at the documents. None of it made sense. Why would my grandfather give these properties to me? And why would my father hide it for 12 years? Then I opened the final envelope. A letter. My grandfather's handwriting covered the page. And the very first line made my chest tighten. If you're reading this, Gabrielle, it means they didn't give this box to you willingly. I kept reading. And with every sentence, the truth became harder to ignore. My grandfather had predicted this exact moment. He knew the box might be hidden. He knew the truth might be buried. And then I reached the part that made everything finally make sense. My father had taken loans against those properties, large ones, without ever telling me, without my permission. And according to the letter, if I didn't act soon, everything my grandfather left for me could disappear forever. The deadline was my 30th birthday, and it was getting closer every day. I didn't sleep much the night after I opened that box. The property deeds sat on the kitchen table in front of me, along with my grandfather's letter. Every time I reread it, the same questions kept circling in my mind. How long had my father been hiding this? And more importantly, who else knew? The next morning I finally got my answer. My brother Todd walked into the kitchen just as I was staring at the documents again. He poured himself a cup of coffee, leaned against the counter, and glanced down at the papers. For a moment his face froze. Not surprise. Recognition. That was the moment my stomach dropped. You knew, I said quietly. Todd rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. Gabby, it's not like that. How long? I asked. He hesitated. Then he finally said the words that changed everything. 3 years. 3 years. 3 years my brother had known that our father was hiding property that legally belonged to me. 3 years, and he never said a word. I felt my chest tighten. Why? I asked. Todd exhaled slowly, like someone about to confess something uncomfortable. You weren't supposed to find out like this, he said. That wasn't an answer. I looked back at the documents and then at him. Did you benefit from this? I asked. The silence that followed told me everything. Todd stared at the floor. And then, almost reluctantly, he nodded. My house, he said quietly. What about it? The down payment. I felt the room go still. $45,000, he admitted. The number echoed in my head. Where did it come from? I asked even though I already knew the answer. Todd sighed. The cabin rental. For a moment I couldn't even speak. The lake cabin at Buckeye Lake, the one listed in the deed with my name on it, had been rented out for years. And the money had never come to me. How long has it been rented? I asked. About 8 years, Todd said. 8 years. My mind began doing the math automatically. 8 years of rental income money that had been quietly flowing somewhere else. I pushed my chair back from the table. Did Mom know? I asked. Todd didn't answer. But the look on his face told me she probably did. That afternoon things somehow got even worse. Because my father realized I had opened the box. And the first thing he did was start making phone calls. At first I didn't understand what was happening. My phone began buzzing nonstop. Texts from cousins. Missed calls from relatives. Voicemails from family friends. The messages all sounded the same. Why are you doing this to your parents? You should be grateful for everything they've done. Family matters should stay private. Then one message finally revealed what was going on. My father had already started telling people a story. According to him, his ungrateful daughter was planning to sue her own parents over money. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen as message after message came in. It felt like watching a storm roll in. Except this storm had been carefully planned. Within a few hours, the narrative had spread through the entire extended family. And suddenly I was the villain. The daughter who betrayed her parents. The one who was tearing the family apart. It was almost impressive how quickly the story traveled. But then my phone rang again. This time the name on the screen made me pause. Aunt Maggie. She was my father's older sister, and one of the few people in the family who had never been afraid to speak her mind. I answered. For a moment, Neither of us said anything. Then she asked one simple question. Gabrielle, what's your side of the story? Those words nearly made me cry. Because in the last 12 hours she was the first person who had even asked. So I told her everything. About the attic, the box, the deeds, my grandfather's letter. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Aunt Maggie sighed softly. I was wondering when this would happen, she said. My heart skipped. What do you mean? Your grandfather told me about those deeds years ago, she said. He was worried your father might try something like this. Suddenly the letter made even more sense. My grandfather hadn't been paranoid. He had been prepared. After that call, I decided I needed facts. Not emotions. Not family arguments. Facts. So I started researching. Property records are public in Ohio, and it didn't take long before I found the first mortgage filing. Then the second. Then the third. Each one attached to property with my name on it. Loan number 1, $180,000. Loan number 2, $95,000. My hands tightened around the mouse. Then I searched the rental records for the Buckeye Lake cabin. The numbers were even worse than I expected. $1,200 a month. For 8 years. I grabbed a calculator. By the time I finished adding everything together, the final number stared back at me on the screen. $390,000. That was how much had been taken from property that legally belonged to me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. And that was the moment I made my decision. If my father wanted to control the story, then I would choose the stage. 3 days later, 50 people would be gathering in my parents' backyard for their 35th anniversary party. Relatives, neighbors, family friends, everyone my father cared about impressing. And they were all going to hear the truth. But I wasn't going to do it alone. I made one final phone call. To my grandfather's old lawyer, Harold Finch. When I explained what I had found, he was silent for a moment. Then he said something that made me feel a lot less alone. I was hoping you'd call someday. We talked for almost an hour. By the time the call ended, everything was arranged. Saturday night. The anniversary party. 50 guests. And one secret that had been buried for 12 years. The countdown had officially begun. Saturday evening arrived faster than I expected. By the time the anniversary party started, my parents' backyard looked almost picture-perfect. A large white tent had been set up across the lawn. Folding tables were covered with simple floral cloths. Someone had brought a speaker, and soft music drifted through the air. Neighbors walked in carrying casseroles and desserts. Relatives laughed as they greeted each other. Glasses clinked. People told old family stories. On the surface, everything looked normal. But underneath that calm, there was tension. At least for me. Because I knew something almost no one else there knew. Every person standing in that yard was about to witness the truth. I slowly scanned the crowd. My father stood near the grill, greeting guests with his usual confident smile. My mother moved between tables, making sure everyone had drinks. My brother Todd stayed close to the edge of the yard, barely speaking to anyone. And then there were the others. Aunt Maggie stood quietly near the garden fence, watching everything carefully. My grandfather's old lawyer, Harold Finch, had arrived earlier and was now sitting calmly at one of the tables, his hands folded over a leather folder. Even the local banker who had approved my father's loans had stopped by. He stood near the drink table, chatting with neighbors, completely unaware of what was coming. All the pieces were there. All the players were on the stage. Eventually, the moment my father had been waiting for arrived. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. The music faded, and my father stepped forward to give his anniversary speech. He cleared his throat and smiled warmly at the crowd. 35 years, he began, wrapping an arm around my mother's shoulders. 35 years of marriage, family, and building a life together. People nodded. A few guests clapped softly. He continued speaking, telling stories about raising children, working hard, and making sacrifices for the family. His voice carried across the yard, confident and steady. Then he said something that made several people smile. Everything I've ever done, he said proudly. I did for this family. The crowd responded with warm applause. For a moment it almost worked. People believed him. But then I stood up. The clapping slowly faded as I walked toward the center of the yard. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My father looked confused at first, like he wasn't sure what I was doing. I held the walnut box in my hands. The same box he had tried to hide for 12 years. Dad, I said calmly, before we finish this celebration, I think there's something everyone here should hear. The yard grew quiet. I could hear the faint hum of the music speaker and the soft rustle of the tent fabric in the evening breeze. I opened the box. Inside were the property deeds and my grandfather's letter. I found this in the attic last week, I said, lifting the papers slightly so people could see them. A box my grandfather left behind. My father's expression changed instantly. Gabrielle, he said sharply. This isn't the time for. I continued speaking before he could finish. These are property deeds, I explained. The house, 40 acres of farmland, and the cabin at Buckeye Lake. Several guests exchanged confused glances. According to these documents, I said slowly, all 3 properties were legally transferred to me when I was 6 years old. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Then a familiar voice spoke up from the back. It was Hank Dawson, an old friend of my grandfather's. Eugene told me about that box once, Hank said thoughtfully. Said he left something important for his granddaughter. My father's shoulders stiffened. And that was when Harold Finch stood up from his chair. He walked calmly into the center of the yard, holding the leather folder. Good evening, he said politely. For those who don't know me, my name is Harold Finch. I was Eugene Lawson's legal advisor for more than 20 years. He opened the folder and removed several documents. I've reviewed the property records this week, he continued, and I can confirm that Gabrielle Lawson is the legal owner of the house, the farmland, and the Buckeye Lake cabin. The yard went completely silent. Then Finch spoke the words that changed everything. Over the past 12 years, he said carefully, loans totaling approximately $275,000 were taken against those properties. He paused. And those loans were not authorized by the legal owner. A wave of shock moved through the crowd. My father stepped forward quickly. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Everything I did was to support this family. Finch remained calm. The deeds are legal fact, he replied simply. The words landed like a hammer. Then Finch continued. There is also documented rental income from the Buckeye Lake cabin. Approximately $1,200 per month for 8 years. My brother Todd shifted uncomfortably near the fence. Finch glanced down at the papers. And $45,000 from that account was used as a down payment on Mr. Todd Lawson's home. A stunned silence followed. Todd's wife slowly turned toward him. You told me your parents helped with that, she said quietly. Todd didn't answer. He just walked toward the gate and left the yard without another word. My father's voice rose again. This is all her fault, he shouted, pointing at my mother. She should have stopped this years ago. For the first time all evening, my mother stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but steady. No, she said. The single word cut through the tension. It was yours. The crowd stared at her. After 35 years of marriage, she had finally said something against him in public. And in that moment the balance of power shifted. I looked around at the guests. Then I spoke one last time. I'm not asking for revenge, I said calmly. I'm asking for what's legally mine. No yelling. No drama. Just the truth. Over the next few weeks, the consequences unfolded exactly as Finch predicted. The bank opened an investigation into the loans. My father was forced to begin repaying the debt. Todd quietly arranged a repayment plan for the money used on his house. And the property titles were finally transferred back into my control. A month later, I drove out to the lake cabin alone. The water was still and quiet that evening. I sat on the small wooden dock, holding my grandfather's letter. There was one final line at the bottom I hadn't noticed before. I read it slowly. You don't owe anyone your silence. For the first time since everything happened, I cried. But they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of relief. Because now, for the first time in my life, I truly own 3 things. My property, my voice, and my future.